At the edge of the Arctic Circle, the sun sets even as a new day begins. It is 2 in the morning. The midnight sun lights the sky. This is Alaska, the last frontier. Alaska is so big, it is really many states. From the fjords of the Panhandle in southeast, to the grassy cliffs of the Pribilof Islands in the Bering Sea, from Prudhoe Bay high in the Arctic, where man fights the elements for oil, to the salmon-rich streams of the Alaska Peninsula, 2 times the size of Texas, 1/5 the size of the lower 48. If you could see 1,000 square miles a day, after a year, you'd still have a lot of Alaska left to visit. And the people are as varied as the terrain. Roughly 500,000 call this state home, from the Eskimo villages to the high-rises of the state's largest city, to the farming communities. You'll find dog mushers, totem carvers, and future mud wrestlers, all in a state so picturesque, words don't do it justice. Looking at a map of Alaska, Prudhoe Bay is in the far north, 250 miles above the Arctic Circle. Juneau, Ketchikan, and Sitka are in the mild climate of southeastern. Further up the coast, the water and communities of Prince William Sound. Moving west, the Kenai Peninsula, Kenai Fjords National Park, and Anchorage. In western Alaska, St. Michael, and the island community of St. Paul in the Bering Sea. In the heart of Alaska, Fairbanks and Mount McKinley. Athabascan Indians in Alaska's interior named this mountain Denali, the High One. Rising 20,320 feet above the sea, this granite rock is the tallest in North America. The vertical rise from the base of Denali to the summit is greater than any other mountain in the world. Athabascan legend tells a story of Denali's birth, of 2 powerful magicians battling over an Indian bride, of a mighty spear deflected upwards and upwards by giant waves turned to stone. Flying around the High One, you can imagine what a battle it must have been. It's as if you're watching creation. The peaks which surround Denali themselves are taller than most others on the continent, but they are merely the setting for this crown jewel of America. Denali casts its shadow on a national park the size of Massachusetts. People come here from all over the world. If they are lucky, they'll glimpse the Denali summit. It takes luck because the mountain is often shrouded with a veil of clouds. Denali Park awakens in late May after 8 months of winter slumber. Then this subarctic wilderness springs to life in the long daylight hours of summer. The beauty and wildlife abound. Nomadic caribou are constantly on the move across the untamed Denali tundra. Theirs is a restless search for food. If they were to linger, the land would be overgrazed, so they roam, crossing thousands of square miles, sometimes flirting with danger. The grizzly will not give chase. He knows he's not fast enough to catch a healthy caribou. The chance to see so many animals makes this national park the most popular in Alaska. Often you'll find Dall sheep on the high ridges both above and below the park road. The ewes, with their young, band together, apart from the rams, in nursery groups. It is here that they learn to become expert climbers. They find safety in the rocky cliffs, knowing they are vulnerable on the flatlands. The creatures of Denali Park fall into two groups, predator or prey. Preparing for winter, from the cutest ground squirrel to the largest moose, is a 24-hour struggle, except perhaps when it's playtime in the spruce forest. It's touching to watch this mother care for her children, knowing that if attacked by a grizzly, she can save only one. While the park and the mountain are spectacular, they only accentuate the vast beauty of this great land. In geologic terms, it's a land in its infancy, still being carved by the forces of nature. High in the mountains of south-central Alaska, alpine meadows filled with snow that under immense pressure turns to ice. Here there is only one season. It is where glaciers are born. The 300-square-mile Harding ice field spills into alpine valleys, feeding more than 36 glaciers of the Kenai Fjords National Park. They dominate this park and offer a view of nature's grandeur seldom seen. Approaching these massive carvers of valleys, you'll look deep into crevasses which could hide most of Alaska's tallest buildings. The pinnacles of ice are as tall as skyscrapers. No words can truly describe the scene in nature and the drama which unfolds below. The glaciers of Alaska all have their own signatures, stress marks and cracks formed as they move over rock buried for centuries. From the air, Shoup Glacier outside of Valdez looks like a highway to the heavens. Because of a warming trend in the Earth's climate, most of these glaciers are in recession, melting back into the mountains of their birth. Drop by drop, piece by piece, they are getting smaller. Glistening icebergs, some larger than a house, clog the water at the face of Columbia Glacier. These bergs, or bergy bits as the smaller ones are called, will float out to sea and melt. Other glaciers, like Portage near Anchorage, calve their children into lakes. Decades ago, these icebergs were but fallen snow, now majestic models of the retreating glacier. Rock which has been covered, perhaps since the last ice age, is now ready to be reborn. Brilliant dwarf fireweed color the land. The cries of kittiwakes, an anthem of new life. In the waters of Prince William Sound or on the rocks of Kenai Fjords, sea lions basking and belching. The sea is teeming with life. Dancing porpoises race any boat which enters their playground. Migrating salmon return through these sparkling waters. Their 1,000-mile journey to the high seas will end in the streams of their birth. The salmon's life is over, but they've spawned the seeds of another generation, so in death, they've assured that the life cycle will continue. When they can, Alaska's brown bears love to feast on salmon, and there's no better fishing hole than the McNeil River State Game Sanctuary. This is the grizzlies' version of fast food. As many as 60 bears will show up at the falls on a given day for a bellyful of fresh salmon. It's the largest concentration of brown bears anywhere in the world. Normally solitary creatures, the bears cast aside their territorial instincts to fish side by side in this Alaska Peninsula River. They're fascinating and sometimes funny to watch. Here, little sister just wants a teeny bite of Big Brother's lunch, but he wants it all. The bears all have their own techniques for nabbing the big one. Some work better than others. It's gotta be frustrating to see all those salmon just out of reach. While the triplets look on, Mom decides to give it one more try. The more patient types stand in the falls and wait for dinner to come to them. It usually works. Compare the fishing technique of this giant of the land to the giants of the sea. Throughout coastal Alaska, these great creatures glide through the waters. At the mouth of Glacier Bay in southeast, a pod of humpback whales fill the morning air with their mist. As they feed, these 40-ton mammals perform a graceful ballet. These whales average 40 to 50 feet long. When they wave their massive flippers, it makes a big splash. Southeastern Alaska is a thin ribbon of deep fjords, islands, and mountains rising from the sea. It's called the Panhandle. It's also called the Banana Belt because the climate here is much milder than the rest of Alaska. Archaeologists believe this coastal land was first inhabited 10,000 years ago after the last great ice age. Today, it is home to 3 native cultures, the Tlingits, Haidas, and Tsimshians. When Russian explorers first set foot on this land in 1741, they encountered a rich Tlingit culture. However, the first shore parties did not return to their ships to tell of it. Today, visitors to the totem parks in Sitka and Ketchikan can take a walk back in time. Towering monuments in cedar still stand in the forests, reconstructed from poles that have since deteriorated. Some totems tell stories. Others are carved to honor an individual. Still others, like the Seward totem at Saxman, are carved to poke fun. The forests of Southeast still provide the raw material for new totems. For Nathan Jackson, it's both a way to earn a living and preserve his heritage.
Well, I think it's the only thing that's left. See, the Tlingit language, for instance, is kind of fragmented. In fact, people don't do business that way anymore. And the only thing that we could leave as far as identification and those types of things, or hallmark, is totem pole.
The sun rarely shines in this neck of the woods, but when it does, Ketchikan is glorious. This island community, built on stilts, is one of the wettest places on Earth, with an annual rainfall of nearly 13 feet. It rains almost 200 days out of the year. The rainforests provide the cedar and spruce for Ketchikan's timber industry. The creeks are spawning grounds for a rich salmon fishery. Even Ketchikan Creek, below the former red light district, is still an active spawning stream. In days past, so many of the silvery fish were canned in Ketchikan, they called it the salmon capital of the world.
Yeah, in a good year, we'd have 50 million salmon. And considering there's only 400-some thousand people in Alaska, that's a lot of salmon. In a good year, a seiner, after he catches 100,000 fish, he puts a broom in his mast. And in a good year, he might put up 3 brooms. In fact, one guy put up a vacuum cleaner.
In the summer, the harbor bustles with activity, and it's not just fishing boats. Stately cruise ships line the docks. Their cargo, thousands of tourists on a once-in-a-lifetime cruise up the Inside Passage. There are 2 ways to see Alaska's Panhandle, by plane or boat, whether in the large ocean-going liners or a little closer to the waterline. Southeast is a wilderness of acrobatic salmon and paintings on the still water, of endless waves lapping the shore, of solitude. It's home to Alaska's capital. Stuck between a rock and the water, by necessity, Juneau climbs up the hills. It is a picturesque capital with the St. Nicholas Russian Orthodox Church, Franklin Street with its frontier atmosphere and multiple saloons, and Juneau's very own Drive Up Glacier, just 13 miles from the governor's mansion. Deep blue ice is exposed by recent calving of the Mendenhall Glacier. It flows 12 miles out of the coast mountains, but this river of ice is gradually disappearing 30 to 70 feet per year. You can't drive in or out of Juneau, so having a boat is like having a second car. Fishing in the Salmon Derby can net you $10,000. Juneau is the kind of city where you meet someone you know on every street corner. The governor walks to work, 2 blocks from the colonial-style mansion to the Capitol building. Government fuels the economy here, but in the summer, thousands of tourists flock to town for a sample of Juneau hospitality. On the outer coast of the Panhandle, Sitka Sound. In the distance, Mount Edgecombe. The mountains here catch the rains of each new storm. The forests are painted with a light green brush and carpeted with moss. It is here, in this rainforest setting, that you'll find Southeast Alaska's oldest city, Sitka, a town older than San Francisco. You can use many adjectives to describe Sitka: charming, historic, thriving, scenic. The community is home for 2 of the hardiest breeds of Alaskans, fishermen and loggers. Each summer, the loggers compete to see who can throw, chop, and saw the best, and have the most fun doing it.
Logging is one of the mainstays of Southeast Alaska, along with fishing and tourism. This is a traditional show that sort of brings back the traditional logging, the way it was in the beginning, back in the early days.
You know, I'm their coach, and they had better win or they don't get any pickled herring.
Sitka was founded by Russian fur traders. The Russian heritage is evident in the skyline of downtown, the spires of St. Michael's Cathedral, the replica of the old Russian fort. It was here that the Russians turned over Alaska to the United States in 1867 for $7.2 million. Sitka's Russian heritage is celebrated today by the new Archangel Dancers. The Russian influence is still felt far and wide in Alaska, mostly in the native villages and in the Russian Orthodox Church. The Russian Orthodox Church at St. Paul in the Pribilof Islands stands in the center of the community. It is much like others in Alaska. Inside, icons from the motherland adorn the walls. They are constant reminders of the church's past and its living present. The Pribilof Islands are often hidden behind a wall of fog. The Russian fur traders were drawn here 2 centuries ago by the voices of the fur seals. These islands in the Bering Sea between Alaska and the Soviet Union are the breeding grounds for more than 2/3 of the world's population of northern fur seals. They begin arriving in May or early June and stay until November. The big males, called beachmasters, weigh in at up to 600 pounds. They stand guard over their harems for up to 2 months without leaving to feed. The pups are born within 2 days after their mothers arrive on these rocky shores. Within a month, they'll be doing a backstroke in the ocean. For now, it's the wading pool. The Pribilof fur seals are no longer killed for their pelts, although the islanders are allowed small numbers of young male seals for food. The Aleuts have not always lived on the Pribilofs. The Russians enslaved their ancestors, bringing them here from their homes in the Aleutian Islands. They have depended on the fur seals for food, clothing, and commerce. After generations of coexistence, islanders say seals and Aleut share a common bond and a common future.
The seals are like our cousins, they're our relatives. And so, like any other relatives that we have in our village, we have to take care of them as part of our extended family. And if the seals were to die off, I think could be a very real possibility our people would die off too. And vice versa, if our people died off, the fur seals would be in jeopardy. So there's a real symbiotic relationship between the two that's very close.
The rocky cliffs of the Pribilofs attract millions of seabirds and hundreds of tourists. Pelagic cormorants, parakeet auklets, tufted and horned puffins are among 200 species of birds nesting on these treeless islands. Above the bird cliffs, the Arctic fox lives close to dinner. This is a unique and rich region between two great continents. The millions of birds and fur seals attest to the bounty of the Bering Sea. It feeds all, the animals and the people who came across the land bridge from Asia and settled the Great Land. Their descendants, Indians, Aleuts, and Eskimos, still live off the sea and land in villages like St. Michael. St. Michael, on the western coast, is home for 200 Yupik Eskimos. Life here is typical of native villages. The villagers live in houses, not igloos. Their economy is based on subsistence hunting and fishing. In the summer, many move their families to fish camps across the bay. Here, Lawrence and Irene Lockwood are drying silver salmon. Irene uses the traditional ulu to clean and prepare the fish. Over the course of the short summer, they'll net and smoke 700 fish, enough to keep their family and their son's dog team fed all winter. Lawrence is speaking in Yupik, his native tongue. He's explaining that for him, this camp is the best place to spend the summer.
Once in a while I could see a moose up there. I got one here some time ago. Also got one walrus from that point over there, a big female. And also got a beluga whale in my net one time, a young one. So that's a little bit of everything here.
This is a Garden of Eden you'd expect to find at the end of the rainbow. A wilderness of great beauty, from north to south, east to west, and in all seasons. Alaska is a land of extremes. Prudhoe Bay on Alaska's North Slope, the largest oil field yet discovered in North America. It's located in one of the harshest environments, closer to the North Pole than it is to Seattle, Washington. You're looking at the frozen Arctic Ocean in May. For 8 months, this area is blanketed with swirling snow and ice. In winter, the temperature will drop to 60 below. Animals adapt to these conditions, and so do the men and women who work here.
Well, the hardest part is to leave up here in winter and go home and have to mow the lawn. But it's a long, long cold period every year.
It's probably like nowhere else on earth. I've traveled a lot. My time off, that's what I usually do. And you can't compare it with anywhere else. It's flat and it's cold most of the time.
Prudhoe Bay produces 20% of America's domestic oil. In its first decade, the Trans-Alaska Pipeline carried more than 5 billion barrels of crude 800 miles from Prudhoe to the Port of Valdez. And it carried Alaska's economy on a roller coaster ride. The shiny pipeline skirts the city of Fairbanks in Alaska's interior. Tourists come to walk in its shadow. Fairbanks grew like an Alaskan cabbage during and since construction of the pipeline. Founded on the banks of the Chena River at the turn of the century, Fairbanks was a supply center for nearby gold mines. It is still a supply center, but the riverboats, which used to haul miners in and the gold out, now bring in gold from the pockets of tourists. The 70,000 people who live among these rolling hills enjoy summers with temperatures in the 90s. But when the leaves fall from the trees and winter comes, the mercury drops to 60 below. It's great country if you like running dogs. Locals call Fairbanks the dog mushing capital of the world.
If you're running dogs, you can just, live in town, work at a job, and come home and hook up and, run to Nome if you want to.
Alaska's largest city glitters at the foot of the Alaska Range and Mount McKinley. The Anchorage skyline reflects its cosmopolitan nature. This is home for nearly 250,000 people, half the state's population. It is a banking center and transportation hub for much of Alaska. It has been said that what's nice about living in Anchorage is that you're only a float plane trip away from Alaska. But Anchorage, with its rush hour traffic and hustle and bustle, is as Alaskan as they come. This urban setting offers scenic beauty, wildlife in your backyard, and access to nearby wilderness as wild and untamed as you can find. Anchorage lies along Cook Inlet, named for the British sea captain James Cook. He and explorers who followed him sailed here in search of the Northwest Passage, but were turned away once and a second time by the shallow waters and mud flats. They named the inlet Turnagain Arm. Today, sailors of a different sort ply the chilling water. These adventurers share the wind with eagles. At low tide, the eagles compete for candlefish, while on shore, a handful of fishermen do the same. Alaska has long had a spell on those who visit, and those of us who call Alaska home. It's what makes men and women run up Marathon Mountain, and despite the toil and trouble, swear they have fun doing it. In Alaska, the paraders march, whether in sun, rain, or winter snow. And no matter when the sun sets, fireworks will light the 4th of July skies. Alaska's spell has Jeff King. He'll mush his dogs over 1,000 miles of winter's worst. The spell has Kathy Hinkle, who can fillet a 100-pound halibut in 1 minute. The spell keeps Jerry Austin at his Western Alaska cabin, despite the weather.
One of the reasons I really like it is because it's not a country or a part of a country that everybody else likes. It's pretty desolate, it's always windy. There's never enough snow in the winter when you want it. There's always lots of snow in May. One year we had 2 feet in June.
If not snow in June, then it's giant cabbage in August. And yes, for the dairy farmers, there's a place here too. Alaska has so much to offer anyone who's willing to take it. It's a wilderness beyond the wildest imagination, just waiting to be explored. Alaska. It's a permanent frontier for America's spirit. the mercury has dropped to 50 below, deep freezing the land once called Seward's icebox. The wind is unforgiving, chilling the air to minus 100 degrees. If it appears at all, the sleepy sun stays low on the horizon. A layer of hoarfrost adds crystalline beauty to last summer's buds. In Cook Inlet, the ice which washed away on spring's tide has returned. Winter has come to Alaska. With its arrival, the last frontier comes alive. Glowing in the morning light, the Chilkat River. Here, at the northern tip of Alaska's Panhandle, a warm current keeps a 2-mile stretch of the river open most of the winter. Every year, a late run of chum salmon returns to this river. After spawning, the salmon provide nourishment for the wildlife of the Chilkat Valley. It is here you can witness one of Alaska's winter wonders, a unique event in nature, the gathering of eagles. They come from all over southeast Alaska to feast. Roosting in the cottonwood trees along the riverbank, more than 3,500 bald eagles, the largest concentration in the world. Echoing throughout this canyon is their song. These proud birds will remain here in the thousands until the river freezes or the food supply declines. Then, one by one, they'll lift their great wings to the winds of winter. Like the eagles, the first Alaskans migrated from Asia to this land in search of better fishing and hunting. Eskimo and Indian villages dot the windswept coast and inland rivers. They live a subsistence lifestyle, hunting and fishing, in a region where the wind will whip the snow into drifts larger than a house and drop the temperature to 100 below and colder. Yet, if given a choice between the Sun Belt or the Arctic, they'd stay right here.
You can see by our dress that we dress for the weather, and it's the cold has become part of us. And we live here because we want to live here.
In Village, Alaska, snow machines have long since replaced dog teams as the principal way to get around in the winter.
It's not uncommon for an individual to put 10, 12,000 miles on a snow machine in a season. I'm talking from October till April. This is your car, this is your airplane, taxi cab, everything you want. It takes you wherever you want to go.
Laurie Shirk lives in Cayena, 30 miles above the Arctic Circle on the Kobuk River in northwest Alaska.
I think our seasons change so drastically that you appreciate each season, and as one season changes to another, you look forward to it. Now, the winter, the dark days are gone and the long days are coming. Spring will soon be here. All the ducks and the geese will be back, and as soon as we have breakup, then you got summer, and everybody looks forward to the fishing season. You go from one season to the other, and you always have something new happening, or you subsist on a new type of fish or game.
The restless caribou are leaving these rolling hills, heading north to their calving grounds. As spring approaches, these smaller groups will join together, moving like giant shadows through the valleys. Through the winter, they have been stalked by wolves and men and are wary of any potential threat.
There she goes now. Somebody shoot?
Today, Laurie will just watch and enjoy his Arctic home. Flying over northwest Alaska, you get a sense of Alaska's immense size. The local borough is the size of the state of Indiana, with only 7,000 residents. Kotzebue is the largest Eskimo settlement in northwest Alaska. It sits like an oasis in a desert of snow and ice. But even though Kotzebue lies above the Arctic Circle, in many ways, it's like every small town. You'll find many of the modern conveniences of urban living, along with the confusion. The toys may be different, but the children still play in the street. You've got your beauty parlor at $55 a perm. A filling station overlooks the frozen ocean. You can fill your tank with regular for $1.65 a gallon. After school, a pickup game of basketball. Only this court is covered with snow. There is also much of the old way of living here. The Eskimos of the coast have learned how to live off the land and sea, how to survive and enjoy living in this harsh climate.
Smell.
Their Eskimo name means real people. You can read their life story in their eyes, hear it in their songs, watch it in the motion of their dance. Some songs tell of happy moments in an elder's past. Others tell of the land and the animals. They are drumming the heartbeat of life. In the darkness of the Alaskan winter, the evening sky dances to the beat of the ancient drums, the dance of the Northern Lights. In this celestial dance, charged electrons collide with molecules in the upper atmosphere. The aurora borealis is like an enormous neon light, which in an average display consumes more energy than does the United States in 1 year. These light shows are unique to the polar regions on the globe. But they are not the only fireworks in the northern sky. Fireworks of the man-made variety signal the start to Alaska's largest winter carnival, the Anchorage Fur Rendezvous.
Easy.
Yeah, this kid's a natural.
By mid-February, Alaskans are looking for an excuse to put on the fur hats and parkas and have some fun.
1, 2, trying to see that 100.
4. Pop 1, you win. Here we go. We need some more dart throwers. 20. There you go. All right.
Ronde also hosts the World Championship sled dog races. Competitors like George Atla and Charlie Champagne shake hands and get ready for the rides of their lives.
Can you imagine, they turn you loose with 20 dogs and then you take off. You don't even want to think about stopping them, you know.
It's just a real thrill.
There's also the Women's World Championship, no less competitive and no less thrilling.
I'm fine. Come on, let's go. Pick it up. Let's go.
I don't know how long a dog team is, but they're as long as a semi-truck almost, and you're on the end of it. It's like kind of crack the whip, and so you get some speed out there.
It's unlike the long-distance mushing, which is endurance, and you know, you're really amazed at how strong people are and how tough people are. This is a sheer adrenaline sport. It's just all out as fast as you can go for still pretty decent distances.
3,100. 3,100.
The Ronde began as a gathering of trappers. It still has a fur auction.
A great big polar bear rug here. Got the head all mounted there. Real nice polar bear. 20,000 on the polar bear. 1,500 head and half head. 2,800.
If you're not in the market for a rug, how about a game of softball? Snowshoe style.
You're safe, you're safe.
There's even a Ronde event for Brutus.
Load them up. 2,900 will be the next weight.
He's a family pet. He's completed his American Championship in the show ring. He's just an all-around good dog.
2 competitors left, Champ Brutus and Titus. Next weight will be 3,800 pounds for the heavyweights. Load them up, gentlemen. 4,400 pounds. All right.
Relationship here in Alaska. Whether it's the Ronde weight pull or the last great race on Earth, the Iditarod. It's an adventure by dog team across 3 mountain ranges, 1,200 miles. It starts on the paved streets of Anchorage and ends 2 weeks to a month later on Front Street in Nome on the Bering Sea. In between, it's the experience of a lifetime. Just musher and dogs, and the best or worst conditions Mother Nature creates. For most mushers, just completing this race is prize enough. For a few, winning the Iditarod is everything.
10 seconds.
Ready to rock and roll.
The first Saturday in March. It's the moment Jerry Austin and his team have trained 11 months for.
Hi, Herbie. Good luck. Good luck. See you.
2, 1, go!
There they go on their way to Nome.
Race veterans and rookies all start out equal. Teams leave in 2-minute intervals for an incredible journey across the last frontier. These hardy athletes are poetry in motion. They are born to run. Getting past the crowds and through Anchorage is the first obstacle. Ahead, the Alaska wilderness. Most of the mushers are Alaskans, but men and women come from all over to tackle the trail in search of their Iditarod dreams. Dan McEachin hails from Colorado.
The country, this is much bigger. This is immense, a land of extremes, the flats, the mountains, the tundra. Well, it's a wonderful opportunity to be alone with them. Back in Colorado, there's a lot of, let's say, stress from the business, pressure, if you will. We have people all day and all night, and it's just nice to be alone every now and then. It's nice to be out here in Alaska alone and just focus in on the dogs and the immediate problems you have with that and the trail ahead, and that's it.
The Iditarod Trail twists and turns towards the Alaska Range, following historic Gold Rush supply routes. It's a white carpet ride through the spruce forests, silent, except for the falling snow and your panting huskies. Along the trail, tent camps and isolated settlements serve as checkpoints. At the checkpoints, the dogs will be examined by race veterinarians. But Bill Cotter can tell at a glance how his team is doing.
They smile, you know, if you look at them, they're smiling. So they're feeling pretty good.
The dogs that shouldn't go on are left at the checkpoints with a ticket home, but they'd rather be running. The chorus moves from dog to dog. Enough rest. It's time to move on. From sea level to Rainy Pass, they've climbed 3,200 feet. It's like being at the top of the roller coaster. Ahead, the treacherous Dalzell Gorge. From year to year, this icy chute varies from bad to worse. Hairpin turns, questionable ice bridges, and open water can be a musher's worst nightmare. The race veterans know what to expect. For rookies like John Patton, it's their Iditarod baptism.
It's a massive undertaking, but it's a wonderful way to get into Alaska with your animals. I think one woman told me, have the time of your life. And it hadn't dawned on me to that point that maybe that's why I was here, that I was going to have the time of my life. And I'm doing exactly what she told me to do.
After crossing the mountains and navigating the gorge, the Iditarod teams find sanctuary at the Roan checkpoint. It's a solitary cabin among a stand of spruce trees. At Roan, Susan Butcher repairs her sled.
I don't think there's any such thing as a drill in this place, though.
Hundreds of miles from the nearest town requires ingenuity. While she searches for the right tools, a camp robber helps himself to her lunch. The mushers must take a 24-hour break somewhere on the trail. Most take it here. It's been days since they've slept.
It's very tiring for the musher, and we get very little sleep, but we mush through beautiful country. It's completely silent out there. All you have is your 16 best friends, or however many dogs you've got, and they're happy to be out there. You're seeing wildlife, you're seeing new country, and I think it's much more fun than most people who look at us would think.
On the average, Iditarod dogs move down the trail at 10 miles an hour. Whether that trail is glare ice on the South Fork of the Kuskokwim River or snowless gravel beds. For a handful of teams, the trail takes its toll. They won't finish, but most keep moving. From checkpoint to checkpoint, village to village, in the wind and bitter cold, always moving, always pointed towards Nome.
Being able to take dogs and yourself and survive the trail and the elements and cross the finish line in Nome, it's a thrill. It's a sense of satisfaction when you cross that finish line.
Winter in Alaska gives way to many passions. These men and women are racing the Iditarod Trail on mountain bikes. Their two-wheel trek will take them 210 wobbly miles through the wilderness.
I don't know, it would have been this soft. I would have did the desert race.
Another winter passion, climbing frozen waterfalls.
How's that ice? It's good up to here. It's starting to get a little candlesticky up here, but it's pretty good.
Near Valdez, Keystone Canyon, hundreds of waterfalls frozen by the first breath of winter hang in mid-Cascade. These icicles are 20 to 50 stories high. If you're looking for a challenge, it starts at the bottom.
Climb on!
Ice climbers from around the world descend on Valdez every winter to challenge these icy sculptures.
You can really feel when it goes in good and when it doesn't like that.
Armed with axes in each hand and crampons strapped to their boots, they attack the ice with all their strength and concentration.
As long as your axes are in well and your feet are well, you're fine. You're safe. And I like being there, and because everything is focused, you're total concentration.
Ice is in good shape.
John Weiland is on the ice nearly every day during the winter. John and climbing partner Andy Embeck are climbing Hung Jury, one of the more unusual ice falls in Keystone Canyon.
See if I can get up over here a ways.
If you're interested in climbing, ice climbing, this is the place to come. You don't have to hike, anywhere. You don't have to hike for 3 hours to get in, to do one climb and come back out or camp out or anything. You can be home in bed, take a shower or a tubby or whatever you want to take, and come back out the next day. It's like Yosemite. It's the Yosemite of ice climbing, this place is.
In the Chugach Mountains, climbers of another sort cling to the rocky ridges. The Dall sheep of Chugach State Park climb to the higher elevations. They find protection on the cliff's edge and can expend their energy on the business of surviving. The conditions are ideal. The warm winds off the water below sweep the ridges clear of snow, exposing bare rock and dry bunch grass. Hunting is not allowed in this area of Chugach State Park. Although curious, the ram doesn't seem bothered by contact with humans. While the rocky ridges belong to the sheep, the snowy slopes are all ours. The Alyeska Ski Resort is 40 miles from downtown Anchorage. At the base, it's only 200 feet above sea level, the lowest base elevation of any ski resort in the world. On the upper slopes, as much as 800 inches of snow falls in a season. Skier Doug MacArthur flips over conditions like this.
It's the closest a person can get to flying without actually leaving the ground. In some cases, you leave the ground. Looking across the Chugach Range, it's just one small range of mountains in the state, and it is absolutely breathtaking. The challenge of skiing in those mountains is just, it's an incredible experience.
Because of the ruggedness of the terrain, these slopes are primarily for the intermediate or advanced skier. But don't tell 3-year-old Raina Hamill. Alyeska has its share of special ski events. Among the favorites, the annual Slush Cup. All it takes is a pair of skis and a little madness. If you're looking for a ski trip through the woods, Anchorage's Kincaid Park has the trails. The beauty of Alaska's winter is found simply where you look for it. In the steam, rising in the morning light. In a bicycle frozen till spring. In a delicate layer of frost. Winter's beauty is also found among the beasts of this great land in their ability to survive. Alaska's beauty is within the people of this land of winter wonder.
interior of Alaska is one of the wildest regions left on Earth. It is a wilderness of mountain peaks and flowing glaciers, vast tundra and spruce forest. It is a land ruled by the forces of wind and ice. In the heart of the Alaska Range lies a national park, whose boundaries have been shaped by the creatures that embody this wilderness. Wolves, grizzly, and caribou wander freely, their lives an expression of their own ancient laws. Sunlight revives the slumbering pulse of life after 8 months of winter. In the lengthening hours of light and warmth, summer returns to the subarctic. The young of the year were born when the first green plants began to emerge. Growth is intense, with less than 4 months to develop and prepare for yet another winter. This is the common law that guides all forms of life here. For the young of the Denali caribou herd, growth takes on a special urgency. Carried unborn from the herd's wintering grounds just a few weeks ago, they must already join the return migration. The calves must keep up with the others across high mountains and swift rivers, and outrun the predators they will encounter. The moose calf spends the first few months of its life within the sheltered environment of the spruce forest. The moose cow will ferociously defend her young against any threat. Wolves and grizzlies, however, still manage to take their toll. Between the time of birth and early winter, the calf will gain nearly 400 pounds. The habitat for most plant eaters of the subarctic has been narrowed to the range of the specific plants they thrive on. Predators tend to be wide-ranging in their search for food. In a land where prey is rarely abundant, the red fox may need to hunt in many habitats in order to feed its young. By autumn, the pups will be ready to venture out from the den and face the coming winter on their own. After a month of almost continuous daylight, the summer's green has spread from the river lowlands to the high alpine tundra. Most of the plant life in this land above treeline grows in the shallow carpet. It is but a thin veneer of life over cold, barren soil and rock. The Dall sheep inhabit this sparse, windswept realm because the available cliffs offer a refuge from predators. The ewes and their young remain separate from the rams during the summer in nursery groups. Through the abandon of play, the lambs quickly develop their skills of escape and begin to compete with each other. The grizzly spends much of its summer in the alpine tundra feeding on grasses, herbs, and an occasional ground squirrel. The moose and caribou calves that the grizzly pursued in early summer can easily outrun it now. The business of life continues into the ebbing summer night, while food and warmth are still plentiful. Time, like the restless caribou herd, moves on. Despite its vast size and seeming lushness, this land cannot support the teeming animal populations that areas like East Africa are so well known for. Concentrations of animals like the caribou must move over large expanses of tundra to find adequate food. The compelling drive behind the caribou's yearly migration, however, involves more than the search for food. Changing from season to season, year to year, the herd's movements are influenced by a myriad of forces. No longer able to keep up with the herd's rigorous journey, the weak and injured will inevitably fall behind. The relationship between a caribou and its predators is one that has worked for thousands of years. Man's presence in this wilderness park is a light touch of what could be a heavy hand. As long as this touch remains light, these natural relationships will continue. Since early spring, the Dall sheep rams have been in bachelor groups, wandering over the high ridge tops of their summer range. It is here that the young rams develop their skills of combat, and in the presence of older rams, learn their place in a dominance hierarchy based on the size of their elegant horns and the strength they possess in using them. The display of these horns is a common language among all rams, a way to immediately convey one's rank. Because of this, most fights occur only when rams of equal horn size question each other's potential. For the sheep, getting along is a means of saving energy. The pika spends its summer in the boulder fields of the sheep's habitat, collecting grasses and flowers into hay piles within the rocks. This is a full-time project and will provide the pika with a steady food supply beneath the winter snow. The marmot has just begun to collect grasses, but these will be used to line its den for hibernation. Though the landscape is still green, the marmot knows that winter is not far away. After months of almost continuous feeding, the Alaskan bull moose is in his prime. By now, the bull has stored a thick layer of fat and has grown a set of antlers nearly 6 feet wide. During growth, these antlers are nourished by a mantle of velvet, a soft covering of skin and blood vessels. In time, this velvet is shed to reveal a formidable sculpture of bone. The rules and rewards for the hierarchies of sheep and moose are basically the same. The bigger the rack, the more dominant the rank, the more likely one is to breed. But the antlers of moose are more than symbols of rank. They are deadly weapons. Before the breeding season, or rut, the bulls develop a hierarchy with others in the area through light sparring matches. These matches rarely get violent, for if either bull was to make the first strike, his opponent could still cause him severe damage, and both would be losers in the game of breeding and survival. For the moose, fighting has evolved to be the final and most serious means of settling questions of dominance. The days grow shorter and the nights are crisp and dark. Summer draws to a close. Autumn is the bright flame of a summer's energy, glowing for a moment of celebration before the approaching wind of winter. It is a time of movement and migration, and it is a time of purposeful play. A young golden eagle will now test its skills of flight on anything that seems challenging. Grizzly and the Arctic ground squirrel perform the final movements in their dance of predator and prey, Soon, they will both be in the long sleep of winter. The season of warmth and growth has been brief, but as always, life is prepared for what lies ahead. It is early October. The Denali caribou herd pauses briefly from its incessant movement as the season for breeding unfolds. Food now lies beneath a deep blanket of snow, but the caribou's hooves are designed to easily reach it. The wolf is also well equipped to reach its winter food supply. Armed with keen senses and incredible endurance, it is a finely tuned hunter. In the company of other wolves, it is the supreme predator of the North. The pack is the central core of the wolf's life, and in winter becomes an essential means of capturing large, swift prey like the caribou. Sometimes the prey is simply run down, but this time the strategy of ambush comes into play. The balance between escape and death is a dynamic one, and more times than not, the caribou will escape. Soon the herd will migrate outside of this pack's territory, and the wolves will shift their attention to other prey. Predation is a sculpting tool in evolution's continuing art of adaptation. Both the snowshoe hare and the willow ptarmigan lose their summer color to remain hidden from the winter creatures that hunt them. The rut of the Alaskan moose draws to a close. The seed for next year's young has been planted. And now the task facing the moose is to survive the next 6 months of severe cold and deep snows within the domain of the wolf. During the several weeks of intense rutting, the bulls have eaten very little, depleting much of the energy stored from a summer of foraging. Some have been killed or injured in battles to gain or defend harems. The wolves are familiar with the time and location of the moose rut and are rarely disappointed when they arrive in search of food. The wolves and the moose share a relationship of mutual need, for it is the wolves' presence which ensures that only the fittest bulls will survive to breed and continue their genetic line. In the reality nurtured by our mechanized world, death seems to be a meaningless end. Here in the Denali Wilderness, the meaning of death is the continuation of life. The Denali caribou herd makes the final thrust of the journey to their wintering grounds. Perhaps the caribou sense a change of temperature, the depth of a new fallen snow, or the sun's shallow arc above the Alaska range. The reasons are as mysterious as the passage they will make on next year's migration. As the Indians say, no one knows the ways of the wind or the caribou. The conflict for dominance is not a struggle for survival of the individual, but rather a foothold on the future. That this foothold exists is the symbol of true wilderness. That this wilderness is preserved is the hallmark of civilization. It is here among the high arches of the Earth's crust that they are born, in these places frigid and remote, barriers to moisture from the North Pacific. During the past 2 million years, their kind has dominated nearly 1/3 of the total land area of this planet. Humankind has called them glaciers. They are rivers of ice, and their movement contains the power to carve great valleys. As they move, they speak to us with the sounds of their labor. These are the sounds of their life and their death. Snowflakes, the frozen breath of the ocean from which glaciers are created. They are the first step in the process of continual change, continual beginnings. Storm after storm, layer by layer, the flakes accumulate. Time and pressure fuse them together, compressing the snow into dense, jewel-like ice. Under the increasing weight of each new snow, the ice moves down slope, like a river, forming a flowing sheet hundreds or even thousands of feet thick. In the Chugach Mountains of south-central Alaska, vast rivers of ice have flowed through the course of many ice ages. In recent geologic times, much of this area was covered by glacial ice 1/2 mile thick. Today, these mountains are still the domain of active glaciers. About 1/3 of the Chugach National Forest is still under the domination of moving ice. In the tradition of their immense ancestors, these glaciers are master sculptors of the landscape. Living symbols of the forces of change and transformation, they return to the sea from which they came. At the end of a glacier, ice breaks off and melts. This may happen faster than the glacier's movement as it flows down the valley. The glacier gets smaller. Because glaciers are slowly shrinking throughout the northern hemisphere, they tell us of a warming trend in the Earth's atmosphere, which can be detected in no other way. The glacier's surface is a surreal landscape of icy spires and crevasses. These crevasses are so deep that a 10-story building could be hidden within them. These are the facial expressions of the tremendous pressure and stress within a glacier as it moves over the uneven terrain. The movement of a glacier is imperceptible to our normal vision. Feet per day is the normal speed of travel. Near the glacier, its monstrous weight can be heard grinding across the land. These are the sounds of a battle between rock and ice, the voices of a struggle nearly as ancient as the Earth itself. The exposed bedrock, over which the glacier once passed, gives mute evidence of the power of the moving ice. As the glacier transforms the land beneath it, the ice itself is eroding away on the front of the glacier, yielding to the force of sunlight and warmer temperatures. Meltwater flows under and through the glaciers, creating caves of exquisite architecture and unfamiliar beauty. As the sun sets, one of the most uniquely adapted forms of life in this cold environment slowly prepares to make an appearance. Although most plants and animals depend on the retreat of glaciers to make habitat available to them, there is one creature whose life unfolds on the snow itself. The ice worm is a creature of such myth and mystery that many people do not believe in its existence. They live between snow crystals near the surface of the glacier, emerging to the open air to feed on pollen carried by the wind. It is known that they are related to earthworms, but many details of their existence remain a mystery. The landscape unveiled by the retreat of a glacier is nearly as harsh as the ice itself. It will take only a few years for the first plants to inhabit this wasteland of barren rock. Their existence creates a thin veneer of soil, a carpet of nourishment, in which other plants soon flourish. With the advancement of time, the bleak landscape is transformed by an unfolding parade of new voices. Created by the melting of snow and glaciers, life flooded into the marsh, cradle and nursery for a myriad of species. As distant glaciers feed the marsh, a new generation of young emerges to begin life's oldest journey of discovery. Green forests invaded the valleys left by the retreating glaciers, became home to new forms of life, and filtered the meltwater streams, which became host to other species. Salmon return every year to these glacial gravels to deposit the seed of the next generation. It is here that these adult salmon began their life's journey, and here it will end. The rich land and forests left behind by the diminishing glaciers have also echoed to the sound of human voices. For thousands of years, native cultures lived along glacial rivers and open coastlines, sustained by an abundant supply of fish and wildlife. These early people left few marks upon the land. Only a few tools and the artifacts of their religion remain. The depression where they built a house 6,000 years ago is almost obscured by the encroaching forest. By the middle of the 18th century, Russians appeared along the coast in search of a wealth of furs. The Russian influence changed the native culture and altered a way of life forever. Prospectors followed the creeks and canyons which were left behind by the retreating glaciers, looking for quick wealth, easy riches. Sometimes they found it, but often the wealth they left behind in their machinery and labor was greater than the gold they found. The relics of their labor reached into the remotest parts of the landscape, supported by the forest as they went. Tales of endless wealth gave way to disappointment for most, and the land was abandoned, along with their claims and their dreams. After the turn of the century, men returned to expand their search for valuable metals with the more sophisticated technology of steam locomotives. They bravely pushed through an inhospitable environment and built monuments to their energy and daring. Today, the forest speaks to us still, reminding us of our past, the natural world, and perhaps a chance to know ourselves. A place for some of us to satisfy a deeply felt need for wildness. The forest continues to sustain a multitude of human needs, providing wood, paper, and fuel. These streams still issue their secret call to the salmon, a call we cannot hear. But their return to these forest streams each year provides a living for many Alaskans. And even today, miners still search the forest for precious minerals, scoured from the earth by the work of ancient glaciers. The forest is timeless, though constantly changing. Like the glaciers, it speaks to us of many moods and seasons. The voices of the glaciers are greatly diminished now. Because the Earth is in a warming period, many glaciers are melting faster than they are expanding. But still, they dominate these lands of coastal Alaska. And still, we hear the roar of crashing ice from snows that fell decades ago. The history of our relationship with this landscape is profoundly influenced by the existence of glaciers. They are the sculpting tools of evolution's continuing art of creation. Millions of acres have emerged from under their domain as the Chugach National Forest. But in time, they will perhaps reclaim this rugged land once again.
Alaska's Glacier Bay is a region still emerging from its long frozen sleep under the ice. Dark ribbons of broken rock are hauled toward the sea by the grinding glaciers that sculpt the mountains and remodel the land. The glaciers bulldoze down the valleys with the harsh weight of 1,000 winters. In the glacier's path, Nearly all that existed of life, of plants or animals or man, is swept away. Ice grips the land in a deadly embrace, yet the mass of the ice itself is living. "200 years ago, a single great tongue of ice lay in Glacier Bay. We are still in the midst of an ice age that has seen 4 major periods of glacial advance and 4 retreats. The pullback of the ice continues today. Retreating ice leaves a void, an empty stage for the opening of another ancient drama. The process of life returning to land just released from its glacial prison. Even as the ice melts, giving up the barren earth, nature's grand design for the land's renewal is waiting. From spores carried on the wind, from seeds in the droppings of birds, from the chemistry of water, soil, and sun, the first forms of new life emerge. A spot of lichen or a button of moss holding forth on barren rock. Then the pioneer mountain avens lay down a fertile blanket for the roots of alder, willow, and cottonwood. From the tangle of alder, willow, and cottonwood thickets, young spruces shoulder up toward the sun. In the final realization of climax forest, hemlock giants rise above the spruce.
Look how much heavier on that tree than some of the others.